You can usually tell when a government is in trouble, not by what it says, but by what it delays, by what it doesn't say. And the appointment of Baroness Batters to conduct a review of farm profitability is not a masterstroke of strategy. We shouldn't be cheering. It is, in fact, a tacit admission that due diligence wasn't done before imposing the now infamous tractor tax in the first place. That tractor tax was clearly wrong, and it was clearly imposed without proper thought. And how fitting it is that a policy with such plough-through haste is now being followed by 6 months of reflective chin-scratching. That doesn't immediately help the farmers, but at least it recognises that the farmers have a point. And the point really is the same point that I think should be attached to the VAT on private schools. It's about a treasury that is arrogant enough not to have done its work. Rather like Donald Trump and his tariff tantrum. The work isn't there, even if you sort of parade little bits of show and tell mathematics that don't quite hang together and that are being cobbled together on the back of an envelope. That isn't the work. The work is pages of review and serious analysis before going through and implementing a scheme as dramatic, as disastrous as the scheme that's been implemented by the Treasury on farms. So to recap about that, last October's budget proposed extending inheritance tax to farms valued at over £1 million, a threshold that in land-based businesses is not as high as it sounds. Treasury officials claimed only 28% of family farms would be affected. DEFRA's own figures suggest it could be as many as 66%. Nearly half of family farms, that's 49%, have since paused or cancelled investment, and some 17% have cut jobs. This isn't taxation as fiscal management, it's taxation as sabotage. Now we're told that Baroness Batters will provide short, medium and long-term recommendations to ensure farming is viable, self-sustaining and competitive. That, one might observe, is precisely the sort of assessment that ought to have preceded a tax hike, not followed it. So there is at least an admission of ill-considered process. So those farmers who thought they were being gaslit or ghosted can now breathe a sigh of relief and recognise that they are in fact right. They were in fact absolutely correct that the government had not followed proper process. Baroness Batters is a widely respected figure, the first female president of the National Farmers Union, a practical farmer herself, a steady hand during turbulent years marked by Brexit, volatile food prices, environmental reforms. She understands both the business and the culture of farming, but even she has called this policy, and I quote, devoid of understanding of how the rural economy functions. In Country Life, she warned the tractor tax would wipe out the family farm, and she wasn't being melodramatic. That the very person who condemned the policy is now being asked to salvage it tells us two things: that the Treasury didn't consult DEFRA, and that farmers weren't just left in the lurch, they were driven over by the government's own legislative combine harvester. So, what is this really? It's a political crisis management dressed up as a strategic vision. And the government wants to appear responsive without actually reversing course. Ministers have been careful to use phrases like listening to farmers, no stone unturned, and New Deal for farmers, but these slogans are only necessary because confidence has plummeted to record lows. The NFU's Farmer Sentiment Index is now at a dismal minus 35. The rushed closure of the Sustainable Farming Incentive Scheme last month only confirmed the view that Labour, like its predecessors, has no coherent plan for food production. And this review, with a shiny new profitability unit and vague nods to a 25-year roadmap, may well produce something worthwhile, but if we're honest, it has all the hallmarks of the classic long grass policy making. Hire someone credible, give them 6 months, and hope the political heat cools in the meantime. So, to examine what farm profitability actually looks like in Britain today, margins are wafer thin. Costs have risen by 30% since the war in Ukraine and have now rocketed even more because of Trump's tariffs. The average farm business income fell by 18% last year. Arable and livestock farms are asset rich but cash poor, often carrying decades of investment debt. Worse still, the model of post-Brexit subsidy reform has been unstable. The original aim to reward environmental outcomes rather than acreage was sound, but the execution has been chaotic. Applications are complex, payments are delayed, and schemes like the SFI have been suspended mid-cycle, leaving farmers in financial limbo. Profitability doesn't just depend on what the farm produces, it depends on predictability, it depends on trust, and that has been eroded by this government. What we're seeing is more than administrative misfire. This is a systemic failure to grasp the function of the rural economy. Farming is not just a business. It's an ecosystem of employment, conservation, food security and heritage. It cannot be treated like hedge funds or real estate. Yet the government continues to tax family farms while exempting private equity firms, universities and charities who own vast tracts of land. The perverse result, multinationals get rollover tax relief and rewilding grants, while tenant farmers stare down the barrel of inheritance bills. In the end, Lady Batters' review may yield good recommendations, but we shouldn't forget this. This should have been the starting point, not the sticking plaster, not the bandage. The Treasury didn't do its homework demonstrably. DEFRA was ignored. The tractor tax was imposed without comprehension, without consultation, and without compassion. It's good to have that confirmed finally. And real credibility, we should be clear about this, real credibility will come not from a review, but from a policy reversal. Because as any farmer will tell you, once you've driven the tractor into the long grass, it's very hard to steer it back out again.